Let's graph y equals cosine 2/3 x. I'm going to write the formula above it. Juan, what's the formula I'm going to write above it?
A cosine b vax.
Yep. Juan, what is our a value?
1.
Yes. And your b value?
Is 2 or 3.
Guys, when you're writing your fractions, write them vertically, just like that. Don't write it like a date, 2/3. Don't do that. Good job, Juan. Just what do we do next? Yep. Let's do it. 2 pi over 2/3. I'm going to make my fraction line really thick so you can see it. This is vertical. I'm going to turn it horizontal. Don't change anything. 2 pi. Class, what math operation? Divided by 2/3. 2 pi divided by 2/3. Class, how do you make that a fraction? Put it over 1. This one turns into multiplication, and that one flips. So now I have 2 pi over 1 times what? 3 over 2. Multiply across. 6 pi over 2, which is 6 divided by 2 is 3. You could just cancel the 2's here, right? Save yourself some time. My period's going to be 3 pi. Ronaldo, step number 2. So 4 intervals. Let's draw a graph. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Class, put your finger where 3 pi goes. Here. Yes? Alright, with your partner now, I want you to find the 5x values so we create 4 intervals. 30 seconds. Ready, set, go. This might be the hardest part. It's just fractions. Alright, here we go. Class, what goes here? 0 or 0 pi. It's not wrong to have a pi there because 0 times anything is 0. Now we just need midpoints. 0 plus 3 and 3 divided by 2. Okay, when it starts getting difficult, I like to draw equivalent fractions. Class, what's the equivalent fraction for with a denominator of 2? So I multiply by 2 over 2. So essentially this is 3 pi over 2, and this is going to be what? 6 pi over 2. Okay. You have to pay attention now, okay? 3 pi over 2 plus 6 pi over 2 is what? 9 pi over 2? But pay attention. You can't just put 9 pi over 2 here. Does this make sense? Look, 3, 4, 5, 6 pi over 2. And 9 pi over 2 is way over here. We had to do what? You're finding a midpoint. So you have to divide it by 2. Dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. Dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. If I multiply across, you get 9 pi over 4. Now I could make another line and go by denominators of 4, but I'm hoping I don't have to do that. Okay? And then 0 plus 3 pi over 2. So let's do it over here somewhere. 0 plus 3 pi over 2. Just 3 pi over 2. And then what's half of that? That becomes what? 3 pi over 4. So if you did an equivalent fractions, it would be like 0 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 9 pi over 4, 12 pi over 4. Hopefully you saw those equivalent fractions. Okay, now we have our values there. Ricardo, what's step number 3?
Evaluate the functions for each of the 5 x values resulting from step 2. The points will be maximum points, minimum x points.
Okay, what I did here is I circled the reduced fraction. Those are my points, because your fractions are going to start getting messy, that's fine. So now I'm going to make my x values. So now I'm just going to write 0, 3 pi over 4, 3 pi over 2, 9 pi over 4, and 3 pi. Okay, this is getting messy, right? You're like, Mr. Ng, I don't know how to evaluate 3 pi over 4 with cosine. But here's the good thing. The other day when we did that warm-up and I told you we'll always go back to the quadrantal angles, you're always looking for that. That's how you know you're doing it correctly. Class, which direction do we work from? So should I find cosine at these values? No, we have to do what? Do what? We're going to multiply by 2/3. Do you see it? X, and then going from right to left, we're going to multiply by 2/3. So here we're going to have 2/3 x. So think about it, we're just multiplying each of these values by 2/3. Two-thirds times 0. If you cancel your 3's, are you guys following along? And then 2 pi over 4 reduces to pi over 2. Yes? That's essentially 6 pi over 12. And 6 over 12 reduces to 1/2. Okay, this is starting to feel good, right? Because 0, pi over 2, right? Are you guys seeing the circle? Yeah? What happens over here? The 2's cancel, 3's cancel. You're left with? Pi. 18 over 12 just reduces to? 3 pi over 2. And you cancel your 3's. You're left with? Oh! Yes! Why am I happy? Because now, do you know what those are? Those are the quadrantals. Does that make sense? You're like, oh, we made it safely. Oh. X, 2/3. Now we're going to multiply by cosine. We're going to evaluate cosine of the previous line, which we already know. Now it's not, just to think of it, cosine of whatever we just did. So cosine at 0, what is it? Cosine 1. Remember, if you need to, always draw that out, right? What is right there? 1, 0, cosine sine. So that's 1. Pi over 2. Pi. 3 pi over 2. And 2 pi. So make yourself a graph. 4, 4, and then let's just pick a color. I'm going to graph pink. So I have at 1, 3 pi over 4 is 0, 3 pi over 2, negative 1, 9 pi over 4 is 0, and 3 pi, 1. I'm going to highlight this row. I call this the golden row. It's golden because it goes back to something I know, which is the quadrantal angles. And once I get that, I've arrived safely to shore. I'm not scared of the big story of fractions.